The Secret of the Copperhead Conspiracy. Chapter 1. The Whispers in the War Department. The ink-stained envelope felt heavier than its meager contents should have allowed. It was a cold, miserable March night in 1863, and outside the War Department, the familiar clatter of D.C. life, the squeak of cartwheels on cobblestones, the distant, mournful whistle of a Potomac steamer was muffled by a steady, soaking rain. Inside the cramped, chaotic office of the Provost Marshal General, a single lamp cast harsh shadows on Captain Thomas O'Connell's face. O'Connell, only 27, carried the weary, haunted eyes of a man twice his age, a fatigue earned not on the open battlefield, but in the close, airless world of counter-espionage. He wore the blue uniform of the Union, but his war was fought in whispers, coded letters, and the treacherous silence of men who looked like patriots. He held the dispatch, not from Richmond, but from Cincinnati, Ohio. It was addressed to his superior, Colonel Lafayette C. Baker, the relentless, often ruthless head of the Union's Secret Service, but O'Connell had orders to screen every piece of incoming intelligence. The envelope contained only two items: a clipping from an obscure Cincinnati newspaper railing against President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and, tucked inside the fold, a small, square of fine, dark blue fabric. O'Connell picked up the fabric with tweezers. It was soft, almost silken. Attached to it was a tiny, intricately stitched copper head of a Liberty coin. He knew what this was: the Copperheads. The name had started as an insult, Republicans calling Northern Democrats who opposed the war effort snakes, but the political faction had defiantly embraced the symbol. They were the Peace Democrats, men who demanded an immediate cessation of hostilities with the Confederacy, often at the cost of the Union itself. Officially, they were a political problem. Unofficially, and more dangerously, they were becoming an armed rebellion waiting to happen. The newspaper clipping was a distraction, a cover. O'Connell ignored the printed anti-war rhetoric and ran his finger along the blank margin. Nothing. He held it close to the lamp. Still nothing. He retrieved a small ceramic dish and a vial of a clear, pale liquid, ferrous sulfate developer. Carefully, he brushed the chemical across the paper's margin. The chemical worked instantly, oxidizing a message written in invisible ink, an ink he knew was a mixture of gallic acid and iron compounds, undetectable until treated. Across the top of the column, a brief, chilling message appeared. "The serpent drills in the west. Tell Graves the harvest is nigh. We await the signal from the great commander." O'Connell felt a familiar, cold knot tighten in his stomach. The serpent drills in the west. This was not simply a note between two disgruntled politicians. This was a reconnaissance report. But the worst part was the address on the outside of the envelope. It had been routed through the U.S. Postal Service, but its final destination, scrawled quickly on the back, was an address only steps away: 142 Pennsylvania Avenue. That was the temporary residence of Senator Josiah Graves, a respected, immensely wealthy man from Indiana, and a known, vocal critic of the war, a man O'Connell's unit was explicitly ordered not to harass. O'Connell laid the evidence out on his desk: the copper insignia, the coded message, and the destination address. This wasn't just dissension, it was conspiracy. It suggested an organized, armed force within the Union states, communicating in code and reporting directly to a man trusted enough to walk the halls of Congress. He didn't need the whole picture to understand the stakes. If the vast, rich, heavily populated states of the Midwest, the Northwest as they were called, were to rise up, it would achieve what the entire Confederate Army had so far failed to do. It would starve the Union of men and materiel and force Lincoln to abandon the fight. Before he could organize his thoughts, the door to his inner office swung open, and Colonel Baker stepped in. Baker was a huge man, his frame filling the doorway, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. "O'Connell," Baker said, his voice a low rumble, "what have you found that warrants the use of the developer at this hour?" O'Connell straightened, presenting the evidence. "Sir, an encrypted message routed from Cincinnati. I believe it confirms the existence of the secret society. They call themselves the Serpent, or perhaps the Sons. They are drilling, they are organized, and their intelligence is being delivered to Senator Graves." Baker studied the clipping, his heavy brow furrowed. He picked up the piece of copper fabric, tossing it down with a dismissive gesture. "Graves. He's protected, Captain. He's too close to the halls of power, too popular in the press. You know what the President said about this political resistance. We are to watch them, not touch them. Not yet." "Sir," O'Connell pressed, his voice taut, "the word is harvest. It's a term for mass action. They're planning an uprising. Look at the language. Great commander. This is military hierarchy, not political. They are organizing a domestic war." Baker looked up, his gaze fixing on O'Connell. "And you intend to prove it?" "I intend to infiltrate it, Colonel. The source is in Cincinnati. The target is Graves. I need to be placed under cover in the West, where the Serpent is preparing to strike." Baker paused, the silence stretching taut between the men. He knew O'Connell was relentless, a man whose loyalty was matched only by his suspicion. If the captain was right, this internal enemy was more dangerous than Lee's army. "Very well, Captain. You have 2 weeks to disappear. We will arrange a transfer order under a false name to a recruiting station in Indiana, the very heart of the snake pit. You will report to no one but me through a coded postal drop. If you are caught, you are a deserter. The President will deny your existence, and I will deny our conversation." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But if you bring me proof that Graves and his men are plotting to raise arms against the Union, I will give you the authorization to hunt them all down. Go, O'Connell. Find the Serpent's nest before the harvest begins."